Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a problem that maybe on the surface seems pretty obscure. One pig biting another pig's tail. Sounds almost niche, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just some, quirky, isolated behavior.
Not at all.
It's actually an abnormal, damaging act. And it represents one of the most significant economic and animal welfare challenges facing modern commercial swine production globally.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is precisely how a seemingly small issue can become like a powerful lens, a way to view incredibly complex multifactorial problems. We've really done a deep dive into a stack of sources, scientific analyses, detailed research reports, industry insights too, to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge for you.
Right. Our mission in this deep dive is to explore this intricate issue. You're going to learn not just what tail biting is, but the surprising why behind it. And its profound, often hidden consequences, plus the innovative strategies currently being developed to stop it.
Exactly. We're trying to go beyond just the visible symptoms, to really unearth the root causes.
Turning what might seem like a niche topic into a powerful example of, well, real-world, complex problem solving. So let's start by trying to get our heads around what exactly tail biting encompasses, because it's not a single uniform behavior, is it?
Precisely. No, it's a true spectrum of abnormal behavior where one pig orally manipulates a penmate's tail. At one end, you have what's sometimes called tail-in-mouth behavior, sort of gentle, non-injurious nibbling. The victim often shows little to no reaction.
Okay, almost harmless then.
Almost. But at the other end, it escalates dramatically. We're talking forceful, damaging bites that cause severe lesions, hemorrhaging, and in, extreme cases, partial or even complete amputation of the tail.
Wow, and crucially, this isn't something pigs typically do if they're, ranging freely out in a field.
Yeah.
It's predominantly seen in modern indoor production systems. What does that tell us about its fundamental origin?
Yeah, it's generally understood as a redirected behavior. See, pigs possess this incredibly powerful innate curiosity and a natural instinct to explore and investigate their environment orally, especially by rooting with their snouts.
Right, they want to dig around.
Exactly. And in barren environments, lacking suitable substrates like soil or straw, this powerful drive is just left unfulfilled. It doesn't have an outlet. So it then gets redirected towards the most readily available and manipulable objects around them, which often are other pigs' tails, or sometimes their ears, actually.
That makes so much sense. So it's much more than just boredom, which is often the easy one-word answer people might reach for.
Oh, absolutely.
Understanding the real motivation behind an outbreak seems absolutely critical for effective intervention. Our sources talk about different typologies or models of why this happens. Can you walk us through those distinct patterns?
Absolutely. And correctly diagnosing the type of biting you're seeing is essential. Because if you apply the wrong solution, it simply won't work, right? The most commonly described pattern, and perhaps the most insidious, is the two-stage model. This one is primarily driven by that frustrated foraging and exploration we just talked about.
Okay, a two-stage process. What defines that initial stage?
That's the pre-damage stage. Here, you'd observe gentle, non-injurious oral manipulation of the tail, often while the pigs are just lying down, relaxed, and the victim typically shows very little reaction. This stage is strongly linked to the absence of a suitable rooting substrate. The tail literally becomes a surrogate for, soil or straw.
And then it takes a grim turn, doesn't it?
Indeed. The damaging stage is when it moves from that gentle manipulation to forceful biting that actually breaks the skin and causes bleeding. Now, this is the crucial turning point. Pigs, they have a powerful natural attraction to the sight and taste of blood. Yes. And this acts as a potent positive reinforcer for the biter. And, disturbingly, it also attracts other pigs in the pen to join in, which rapidly escalates the outbreak into a very serious problem. Intervention must occur before blood is drawn to prevent this vicious cycle from taking hold.
Wow, so blood literally fuels the fire. That's an incredibly powerful and, frankly, disturbing dynamic.
Yeah. What about the other models? Are they different?
Yeah, quite different motivations. Then we have the sudden forceful model. This is characterized by sudden, violent bites with no preceding gentle manipulation. It's often described as overt aggression or even cannibalism in some cases.
Okay.
Now, this isn't linked to a lack of enrichment, but rather to acute frustration from competition for limited resources.
Ah, so like fighting over food.
Exactly. Think overcrowding at feeders or waterers, or maybe just not enough comfortable lying space for everyone. The management solution here is quite direct, that resource allocation. It's not primarily about adding a toy. Got it. So if you're seeing immediate aggressive bites, you should be looking at things like feeder space first, not necessarily enrichment. What's the next typology?
The obsessive model is quite unique. Here, you have a single pig becoming pathologically fixated on biting multiple penmates.
Just one bad apple, so to speak?
Sort of, yeah. The underlying cause is less understood, but is thought to be related to the biter's own intrinsic characteristics. Maybe its health status, or perhaps something about its protein metabolism. In these specific cases, prompt identification and removal of that single obsessive biter can often resolve the entire problem for the rest of the group.
Interesting. So it can sometimes be a lone pig causing all the trouble. And there's a fourth model for understanding outbreaks.
Yes, the sudden outbreak model. This involves a very rapid spread of both mild and severe tail damage, both within a single pen and even spreading between adjacent pens. It appears to be triggered by sudden, unpredictable environmental changes, things like abrupt shifts in feeding times, maybe sudden changes in diet composition, or significant temperature fluctuations. This one really highlights the immense importance of stability and consistency in a pig's daily routines and environment.
Okay. Now, beyond these behavioral typologies, are there any, innate biological factors at play that just make pigs predisposed to this if the conditions aren't quite right?
Absolutely. There are definitely underlying factors. Pigs have that incredibly powerful oral nasal exploratory drive we mentioned earlier. If that's thwarted, that's a major risk factor right there. Also, something people might not realize, pigs undergo natural teething phases around 3 to 4 weeks, and again at 7 to 8 months.
Right, like puppies.
Exactly. And that can prompt them to chew on objects, including tails, just to relieve that discomfort.
Makes sense.
And yes, that natural attraction to blood we discussed earlier is a powerful accelerant. Even an accidental wound that draws blood can ignite persistent biting behavior and trigger imitative behavior in others, leading to a rapid and severe outbreak.
So it's rarely just one single cause, is it? It sounds more like a combination of factors stacking up. Our sources brilliantly describe this as the mothership of multifactorial issues.
It's an incredibly apt description, isn't it?
It really is.
An outbreak is almost never the result of a single isolated cause. It's almost always the cumulative effect of numerous stressors that just push a group of pigs past a behavioral tipping point. This concept is often called risk factor stacking, where several, maybe suboptimal conditions combine, and together they exceed the animal's capacity to cope.
Okay.
So prevention, therefore, really requires systematically reducing the overall stress load that those pigs experience.
Given this idea of risk factor stacking, it begs the question, what are these stressors piling up on the pigs? Let's maybe break down some of the biggest culprits, starting right where the pigs live, the production environment itself. What are the key elements here?
Well, the single most significant risk factor, based on the research, is undeniably the lack of a suitable substrate, something for pigs to perform their innate rooting and foraging behaviors in. Housing systems with fully or partially slatted floors, they're efficient for waste management, sure, but they create a barren environment. They deny pigs this crucial behavioral outlet, and this frustration is the primary driver of that two-stage biting model we talked about. Conversely, the provision of materials like straw is consistently demonstrated to be the most effective single preventative measure.
So if they can't root in the ground or, straw, they redirect that powerful instinct onto their penmates.
Yeah.
That's such a direct link to a core behavioral need. What about space and social dynamics? Does that play a big role?
Oh, hugely. High stocking density and overcrowding, they just increase competition for essential resources like feed, water, and comfortable lying areas. This heightened competition is a direct trigger for the sudden, forceful model of tail biting.
Okay.
And beyond just space per pig, mixing unfamiliar pigs together or housing pigs with really significant size variations in the same pen, that can destabilize the social environment and increase overall aggression and stress.
And what about those maybe more subtle environmental conditions like climate, air quality, lighting? How do these factors play a role? They seem less direct.
They might seem less direct, but they're often chronic stressors. They subtly lower the pig's threshold for abnormal behaviors to emerge. Things like thermal discomfort, whether it's heat stress or cold stress, and even large daily temperature fluctuations, Those can trigger biting.
Right.
Poor ventilation, too. If you get a buildup of noxious gases like ammonia or too much dust, high humidity, or even just persistent drafts, all of that irritates the animals and contributes to chronic discomfort and stress.
And lighting.
Lighting is important, too. Environments that are either too bright or too dim, or maybe they lack a sufficient period of darkness. The recommendation is a minimum of 6 hours that can increase restlessness and agitation.
So it's clear the physical surroundings profoundly impact this. But what about what goes into the pig? How does nutrition, or maybe the lack thereof, influence this complex behavior?
Feed and water access is absolutely critical. Inadequate feeder or drinker space, meaning pigs have to compete intensely, or what the industry calls out-of-feed events, literally running out of food, even for short periods, creates intense frustration and aggression.
And that can lead directly to biting.
Yes, that can manifest directly as sudden forceful biting. It's that immediate competition-driven aggression.
And are there specific nutritional deficiencies or imbalances we should know about?
Definitely. Deficiencies in certain minerals, particularly salt sodium, are a really well-documented risk factor. There's a theory that a lack of salt may actually increase the pig's natural appetite for blood, making any initial wound far more likely to escalate into a full-blown biting incident. Adding salt to the diet is actually a common emergency intervention during an outbreak.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah. And also both deficiencies and excesses of protein and imbalances in specific amino acids like tryptophan, which is a precursor for serotonin, the mood regulator, are also implicated.
Okay.
The role of dietary fiber is a bit complex. Some studies suggest benefits, maybe by increasing satiety, making pigs feel fuller. But others have actually found high fiber associated with more biting in some contexts. So it implies the specific type of fiber and the overall dietary context matter greatly.
Right, not all fiber is the same.
Exactly. And lastly, mycotoxins. If feed gets contaminated with molds that produce these toxins, they act as physiological stressors, just adding to that overall stress load on the animal.
What about the pig itself? You mentioned intrinsic factors. Are some pigs just more prone to biting or maybe being bitten, regardless of their environment?
Yes, these animal-centric factors are definitely crucial. A pig's general health status is a strong determinant. If a pig has an underlying disease or chronic pain or just general discomfort, that can increase irritability in potential biters. Or conversely, it can make victim pigs more lethargic and less reactive, making them easier targets.
Okay.
For instance, there's evidence that gastrointestinal issues like gastric ulcers can increase a pig's motivation to chew, possibly as a coping mechanism. And interestingly, some studies show that biters themselves may show signs of compromised immune function, suggesting they might actually be under chronic stress even before they start biting.
Now, I've heard some intriguing whispers about how genetics might play a role in this, or even something as, well, unexpected as the gut microbiome. Is there genuinely cutting-edge research starting to reshape our understanding in these areas?
You're absolutely right. These are really exciting new frontiers, especially the gut-brain axis. Studies are now showing significant differences in the gut microbiota, the community of bacteria in the gut of biters and victims, compared to neutral pigs.
How so?
Specifically, they often find a low abundance of beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus. And these involved pigs also tend to exhibit higher levels of the stress hormone cortisol.
Wow.
So the hypothesis emerging is that stressors, whether they're environmental, social, or nutritional, can actually alter the gut microbiome. This imbalance, or dysbiosis, might in turn influence brain function and mood, potentially increasing anxiety or aggression and predisposing certain pigs to biting.
That's fascinating.
It really shifts the paradigm, doesn't it? From thinking of it as purely behavioral to potentially a complex physiological and even microbial disorder.
So the state of their gut could literally affect their brain and their behavior. That's kind of mind-blowing. And what about genetics? Is there a genetic link?
Yes, evidence is increasingly pointing towards a genetic component. Heritability for both performing tail biting and receiving tail bites seems to be in the low to moderate range. It can vary by genetic line, though. For example, one study found it was heritable in landrace pigs, but maybe not so much in large white pigs.
Okay.
A significant concern here, though, is an unfavorable genetic correlation that's been observed. It seems that selecting heavily for economically desirable traits like increased leanness and faster lean tissue growth may have inadvertently increased the genetic predisposition to tail biting in some lines.
Oh, wow. So breeding, for one thing, might have unintentionally made this problem worse.
That's the concern, yes. It means future breeding programs really must consciously incorporate behavioral and welfare traits alongside production traits to develop more resilient animals. Researchers are even actively looking for what they call a tail-biting resistant phenotype.
A pig that's just naturally less likely to bite or be bitten.
Exactly.
If we connect all this back to that mothership of multifactorial idea you mentioned, it really highlights how everything is connected, isn't it? The environment, nutrition, health, genetics, they all stack up.
Precisely. It's the cumulative effect that matters most.
Yeah.
A barren environment frustrates that natural rooting behavior, which can lead to the two-stage biting pattern. High stocking density creates competition, triggering that sudden forceful biting. Chronic stressors like, thermal stress or poor ventilation make pigs more irritable and less able to cope.
Right.
Inadequate feed access creates frustration and aggression. Low dietary salt might increase the attraction to blood, making small incidents worse. And then maybe genetic selection for leanness increases behavioral fragility. It's a really complex, interconnected web where a breakdown in one area often exacerbates problems in others.
And this isn't just about, pig comfort, though. That's hugely important. Our sources detail a really heavy toll, both economic and in terms of animal welfare. Let's talk about the money first.
Yeah, the economic losses are often a direct and pretty stark measure of the animal suffering involved. On the farm itself, producers face reduced feed intake, lower daily weight gain, which means increased time and cost to get those pigs to market weight. There's also increased labor for monitoring, separating pens, treating affected animals, plus direct costs for veterinary care and antibiotics.
And in severe cases.
In severe cases, there's increased culling of pigs that just won't recover, and even higher on-farm mortality rates.
And these issues don't just disappear when the pig leaves the farm, do they? They follow the pig right to the processing plant.
They absolutely do. Tail lesions are a significant cause of carcass condemnation at the abattoir. Those open wounds allow bacteria to enter the bloodstream, which can lead to systemic infections like spinal abscesses, arthritis, and something called pymia, basically, pus in the blood. Any of these can render the entire carcass unfit for human consumption.
So the whole pig is lost.
Potentially, yes. And even if the carcass isn't fully condemned, trimming away the damaged tissue around the tail reduces the saleable weight and the overall value of the carcass. Victim pigs often have lower dressing percentages and are sold at discounted prices.
What's the quantifiable scale of this financial burden? Our sources had some pretty compelling figures, didn't they?
Yeah, the financial burden is substantial. Our European sources show costs ranging from less than €1 to several euros per finished pig. That adds up to millions annually for national industries, like the UK, facing estimated costs over 3.5 million per year. In Denmark, one estimate put the cost of a single victim pig at nearly €19.
Wow.
And in North America, while maybe less precisely quantified across the board, it's described as considerable. One hypothesis estimated around $23 per victim pig, high prevalence rates, sometimes up to 16% even in docked pigs, and much higher in undocked, obviously means significant impact. There was one severe outbreak in Ontario that affected over 40% of pigs in a facility. Yeah, leading to elevated mortality and really costly hospital pen management. These aren't just abstract numbers. They represent millions in lost revenue and increased expenses for producers worldwide. It underscores the urgency of prevention.
Absolutely. That's a significant financial drag on the industry. But the welfare compromise is perhaps even more profound.
Yeah.
And it affects not just the victim, but really all the pigs in that social group, right?
Indeed. For the victim pig, there's obviously the acute pain and distress from the injury itself. But those open wounds often lead to nasty secondary bacterial infections, like those spinal abscesses we mentioned, which are incredibly painful. There's also clear physiological evidence of systemic inflammation in bitten pigs, indicating a significant stress response throughout their body.
And it's not just temporary pain, is it?
No, and this is particularly concerning. Research suggests that severe injuries, like tail amputation or near amputation from biting, can induce chronic neuropathic pain. Things like hyperalgesia, where the area becomes overly sensitive, and neuromas, which are these painful nerve growths at the injury site. It means the suffering can continue long after the wound has visibly healed.
So the suffering isn't just immediate. It can be long-term, impacting their overall well-being and probably diverting metabolic energy away from growth too.
Exactly. But what about the biter and the other, neutral pigs in the pen? Are they just unaffected bystanders?
That's a really important question. Is the biter simply an aggressor, or is something else going on?
Well, our sources make it quite clear that the act of tail biting is, in itself, an indicator of compromised welfare for the biter, too.
No, so?
It's seen as an abnormal response. a sign of frustration, stress, or unmet behavioral needs. The biter is often an animal that's failing to cope with its environment or social situation. And remember that finding about potentially compromised immune function in biters, that supports the idea that they might be under chronic stress themselves.
So the biter is like a signal.
Exactly. You can think of the biter as a canary in the coal mine for the group's overall health and welfare. Their behavior signals that something is wrong in that environment for potentially many pigs.
I really like that canary in the coal mine analogy. It truly shifts the perspective away from just blaming the biter.
It does, and even the neutral pigs, the ones not directly involved in biting or being bitten, they're still affected. They're living in a tense, unpredictable, and stressful social environment, which impacts their welfare too.
Yeah, you can imagine the constant tension. And our sources use another great analogy they call the intact tail an iceberg indicator. What does that mean?
It means the visible condition of pigs' tails, whether they're damaged or healthy, reflects a much larger submerged mass of underlying welfare issues on the farm. A high prevalence of tail lesions signals that conditions are likely suboptimal in terms of housing, management, nutrition, or health, things you might not see otherwise.
Okay.
So from this perspective, routine tail docking, the practice of partially amputating the tail shortly after birth, can almost be seen as an admission. An admission that current production environments don't consistently meet the pig's fundamental behavioral needs.
Right, because if the environment was perfect, you wouldn't need to dock.
Exactly. So monitoring the state of intact tails becomes a valuable, holistic surveillance tool for overall farm welfare. It helps reveal issues that might otherwise remain hidden beneath the surface.
Given all these complexities, effective control clearly relies on proactive prevention, not just, reactive treatments after the fact. And this brings us squarely to one of the most controversial aspects of this whole issue, tail docking itself.
Tail docking is undeniably a dilemma. There's no easy answer here. It's essentially a painful mutilation performed with the intention of preventing potentially greater pain and suffering from severe biting later on.
That's a real paradox, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It highlights a fundamental systemic conflict within the industry. The procedure itself usually involves partially amputating the tail, typically in the first week of life, often without anesthesia, using clippers or sometimes a heated cauterizing iron.
And does it work?
Well, it is demonstrably effective at reducing the incidence of severe lesions, particularly in the kind of barren, high-density systems common in some parts of the world. For example, one large U.S. study found over 50% of undocked pigs had moderate to severe tail damage, compared to only about 7.5% of docked pigs in the same system.
That's a big difference.
It is. The thinking is a shorter, perhaps less sensitive stump is less attractive to potential biters, and it might allow victims to escape more quickly. But, and this is the crucial, but it's a purely symptomatic treatment. It doesn't fix the underlying cause.
Right. So it works to reduce the symptom, the bitten tail, but not the actual reason why pigs want to bite tails in the first place.
Yeah.
What are the welfare implications of docking itself, and how does the regulatory landscape differ globally on this?
From a welfare perspective, the docking procedure itself is acutely painful and stressful for the piglet. And there's growing evidence it can lead to chronic pain later in life, potentially due to the formation of those painful nerve growths, neuromas, in the tail stump.
Ouch.
Yeah. And crucially, as we said, it does not address the underlying environmental deficiencies or frustrated motivations that actually drive the biting behavior. Now, the regulatory picture is quite different depending on where you are. In the European Union, routine docking has actually been legally banned for decades under Directive 2008/120/EC. It's only permitted as a last resort under very specific conditions when other preventative measures have failed.
But is that ban effective?
Well, that's the challenge. Enforcement has proven difficult, and it's estimated that somewhere between 90 to 95% of pigs in the EU are still docked, despite the legislation. So there's a gap between law and practice.
Okay. And North America?
In North America, tail docking remains a standard, widely accepted practice. It's often viewed by producers as a necessary management tool, almost essential, to prevent the more severe welfare consequences and economic losses associated with uncontrolled biting outbreaks in typical commercial systems there.
So what are the core arguments boiling down for and against this practice? It sounds like there's a really strong tension.
Precisely. Arguments for docking generally center on its proven effectiveness in reducing severe lesions and preventing the associated significant economic losses. It's often considered necessary, particularly in barren or high-density systems. And there's the point about reducing tail attractiveness and possibly increasing the victim's ability to escape.
Okay, the pragmatic argument.
Right. Arguments against it focus on the fact that the procedure itself is acutely painful, that it can lead to chronic neuropathic pain, and fundamentally that it masks underlying deficiencies in the pig's environment or management without actually solving the root problem. Plus, the fact that it's banned as routine practice in the EU signals a kind of global shift in welfare standards and expectations.
So, if docking is, at best, a controversial crutch, what is the true cornerstone of prevention? What should we be focusing on instead?
Environmental enrichment, unequivocally. But we need to be clear what we mean by enrichment. This isn't just about providing, toys for pigs. It should be thought of as a behavioral nutrient, something absolutely essential for a pig's normal psychological function, just like protein or vitamins are essential physically. Its absence leads to a kind of deficiency syndrome, which manifests as abnormal behaviors like tail biting.
A behavioral nutrient, I like that.
Yeah, and effective enrichment must genuinely engage the pig's powerful innate exploratory drive. It needs to be manipulable, chewable, investigable, and crucially, destructible.
Destructible. Why is that important?
Because static, indestructible objects, like, say, a hard plastic ball or a metal chain hanging down, lead to rapid habituation. Pigs are smart. They quickly explore it, realize they can't change it or get much satisfying feedback from it, and then they just lose interest. The enrichment loses its value very quickly.
Ah, okay.
Novel, complex, and replenishable materials that they can actually root in, chew up, and destroy are far superior for keeping them engaged.
So not just that proverbial rusty chain hanging in the pen. What's the hierarchy then? What are the best types of enrichment materials?
Well, the optimal materials are things that act as substrates for rooting and foraging. Loose, deep bedding like straw is widely recognized as the gold standard. It's edible, it's chewable, it's deformable, and it allows pigs to fully express that powerful rooting behavior. Other high-quality substrates include things like hay, silage, mushroom compost, peat, even wood shavings.
Okay, the stuff they can really dig into. What if that's not possible?
Yeah, right. Then we look at suboptimal materials. They're less effective than substrates, but they can still provide significant benefit where loose materials just aren't feasible with the housing system. Here, destructible objects are key. Things like soft wood blocks they can chew, natural fiber ropes they can fray, or even jute sacks they can tear apart. These are still superior to non-destructible items like chains or old tires, which, as we said, provide minimal sensory feedback and fail to sustain interest long term. They just become part of the furniture.
That brings us neatly to what's often called the slatted floor problem, doesn't it? The really practical challenge of implementing truly effective enrichment in many modern systems.
Yes, exactly. This is the central engineering and management challenge. The most effective enrichment loose substrate like straw is largely incompatible with the most common housing systems used globally, which rely on fully slatted floors over liquid manure handling systems.
Because the straw clogs the drains.
Precisely. Straw and other organic materials simply clog the slurry pumps and pits. Overcoming this requires significant innovation, either through developing slat-compatible delivery systems for these materials, things like straw racks placed over solid floor areas within the pen, or, more fundamentally, exploring alternative housing designs that are inherently better suited to accommodate the pig's natural behaviors from the start.
So if the gold standard straw can literally clog the system, what does the research tell us about the overall efficacy versus practicality of different enrichment types? There must be trade-offs.
Absolutely, there are trade-offs. Our sources give a good overview. Materials like straw, hay, and silage offer high behavioral engagement and sustained interest, but they have low compatibility with typical fully slatted floors and often have medium to high costs for material and labor.
Okay. What about the next best options?
Things like soft wood blocks and natural fiber ropes offer medium to high engagement and pretty good sustained interest. And importantly, they have high compatibility with slatted floors and generally lower to medium costs. So these are often seen as a practical compromise.
And the less effective ones.
Then you have things like chains and hard plastic toys. They have high compatibility and low cost, which makes them appealing from one perspective. But they provide very low behavioral engagement and low sustained interest because of that rapid habituation, which essentially means, from the pig's perspective, they are largely ineffective at meeting that core behavioral need.
So it's clear we need a really holistic approach. It's not just about enrichment, but integrating all the farm management aspects to minimize stress overall.
Absolutely. It has to be integrated. Optimizing pen design and resource allocation is key. That means space allowances that comfortably exceed the legal minimums and ensuring there are enough well-designed, properly functioning feeders and drinkers to prevent that harmful competition for feed and water, remember? That triggers the sudden, forceful biting. Strategic nutritional management is also vital. Providing a high-quality, balanced diet consistently with careful attention to those key factors like salt, fiber, and specific amino acids. And avoiding sudden changes in feed formulation is also crucial for maintaining good gut health and behavioral stability.
And the basics.
And finally, just diligent climate and health management. That means constantly working towards optimal thermal comfort and excellent air quality, alongside robust herd health programs to minimize underlying disease challenges, which just makes pigs more resilient overall.
Okay, so that's the prevention side. But even with the best prevention efforts, outbreaks can still happen, right?
Right.
So what are the reactive strategies? How do we detect them early and manage an outbreak once it actually starts?
Yeah. Despite best efforts, sometimes things still go wrong. The absolute key here is early detection and prediction. There's a crucial shift happening, moving away from simply reacting once you see bloody tails to intervening much earlier based on subtle behavioral cues that often appear days in advance.
What kind of cues?
Well, the most specific and scientifically validated early warning sign is actually a change in tail posture, an increase in the number of pigs in a pen holding their tails low, or tucked tightly against their body, or just hanging limp instead of holding them in their natural curl.
Really, just how they hold their tails?
Yes. It seems quite subtle, but validated studies show this change can provide up to a 7-day warning window before significant biting damage occurs. It's believed to be either a protective measure by potential victims or perhaps an early sign of pain or discomfort.
That's a fantastic early warning signal. Are there other behavioral signs people should look for?
Yes. Generally, increased activity and restlessness in the group. Pigs just milling around more, taking longer to settle down after disturbances. Also, changes in how they interact with objects and each other. For example, an increase in pigs chewing or nosing their pen mates instead of engaging with the enrichment provided. That's a clear red flag that their current environment isn't meeting their needs anymore. Altered feeding or drinking patterns can also be precursors.
This sounds like a monitoring task where technology could really make a difference. Constantly watching tail posture seems hard for humans to do reliably. What about precision livestock farming, or PLF?
PLF offers a potentially transformative solution here, exactly because it allows for continuous automated monitoring. Machine vision systems, using 3D cameras and sophisticated computer algorithms, can automatically track tail posture for every pig in a pen.
Wow.
They can detect statistically significant increases in low-hanging tails and send immediate alerts to the farm manager's phone or computer.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And other PLF tools include activity monitoring, using things like optical flow algorithms to quantify group movement and detect abnormal restlessness. And advanced machine learning algorithms can be applied to data streams from, say, electronic feeders or water meters to predict outbreaks based on subtle deviations in consumption patterns, sometimes even before visual signs like tail posture changes become apparent.
So the tech can see it coming. But, okay, let's say an outbreak does start, despite your best efforts, or maybe before PLF is widespread. What's the game plan then? Our sources suggest there's a really structured way to approach this, a kind of tiered response. Can you walk us through that?
Yes. Having a clear, structured contingency plan is absolutely essential for effective response. First, you need immediate actions. The priority is to isolate and treat the victims. That means removing any pigs with fresh or bleeding lesions to a separate hospital pen. This protects them from further injury and, crucially, removes the stimulus of blood from the main pen. Wounds need to be cleaned and treated, usually with an antiseptic or antibiotic spray. And sadly, severely injured pigs where recovery is unlikely should be humanely euthanized.
Okay. What are the biters?
Simultaneously, you need to try and identify and isolate the primary biters. This usually involves a short, focused observation period, maybe 10-15 minutes, watching the pen closely. You're looking for the pigs actively doing the biting, who often have relatively undamaged tails themselves. Removing these main perpetrators, especially if it fits that obsessive biter model, can sometimes stop the outbreak quite quickly.
And then what do you do back in the main pen for the pigs still there to address the immediate behavioral drivers?
Right, that's the next step. Pen-level interventions. The single most effective immediate action, according to the research, is to provide novel, high-impact enrichment. And lots of it. Think a large quantity of engaging material the pigs haven't seen recently, multiple natural fiber ropes, maybe fresh straw or hay if possible, even just sturdy cardboard boxes. This provides a powerful distraction and an alternative outlet for that oral exploratory behavior.
So flood the pen with new, interesting stuff.
Basically, yes. One study even found that simply adding extra ropes was the fastest method to reduce biting during an active outbreak. You can also apply deterrent tail ointments or sprays like traditional Stockholm tar or other foul-tasting substances directly onto the tails of all pigs in the pen to make them less attractive.
Make the tails taste bad.
Exactly. And sometimes, in consultation with a veterinarian or nutritionist, short-term dietary adjustments might be recommended, like adding extra salt to the diet or just sprinkling salt on the floor. This might help satisfy that potential craving we talked about and reduce the attraction to blood. Magnesium oxide is sometimes used too, possibly for a calming effect.
Okay, so you manage the immediate crisis. After things have calmed down, then what? How do you prevent it from just happening again next week?
That's when you absolutely must shift focus to assessing and correcting the underlying root causes. Once the immediate crisis is under control, you have to conduct a thorough root cause analysis for that specific pen or group. This means systematically reviewing all those potential environmental, nutritional, and health factors we discussed earlier. Check the ventilation rates, look for drafts, check the temperature records for fluctuations, reassess the stocking densities, make sure all feeders and waterers are functioning correctly and accessible. It's really about finding the missing piece in the puzzle, or maybe the combination of factors that pushed that particular group over the behavioral edge.
And our sources even outline a really practical, comprehensive tiered intervention protocol, kind of like an escalating response plan. Can you explain that maybe from the earliest warning signs right up to a severe outbreak?
Yes, it's an excellent framework for putting this into practice on a farm. It starts with Tier 1, prevention and early warning. The trigger here is detecting those early warning signs we talked about, maybe automated alerts from PLF, or visual checks showing, say, more than 15% of pigs with low or tucked tails, or just observing increased restlessness or pig-on-pig nosing.
Okay, so you see the signs, but no blood yet.
Exactly. The actions at this stage are preventative and aimed at de-escalation. Provide some distraction enrichment, maybe a smaller amount of high-value material like 200 grams of fresh straw or haylage per pen, or introducing a new rope. Increase observation frequency for that specific pen. And initiate a preliminary risk assessment. Quickly check things like temperature, look for drafts, check water flow rates.
And what if it progresses and you actually see injuries?
That moves you up to Tier 2. Outbreak initiated. The trigger here is seeing the first actual lesions or any blood being drawn on one or more pigs. Actions now need to be immediate and decisive. Isolate and treat the victims right away. Attempt to identify and isolate the main biter with that 15-minute observation. Then, flood the pen with a large quantity of novel enrichment, multiple ropes, plenty of straw if feasible, cardboard. Apply those deterrent sprays or ointments to all tails, and crucially, conduct a full root cause analysis immediately to figure out what went wrong.
And if it's a really bad situation, uncontrolled.
Then you escalate to Tier 3, severe widespread outbreak. The trigger here is uncontrolled biting that continues despite those Tier 2 interventions, perhaps with multiple biters identified or new victims appearing rapidly. Actions here become more drastic. You might consider significant environmental changes like drastically reducing the light intensity in the building. Less light can make blood less visible and might help calm the pigs. If the facilities allow, splitting the affected group into smaller subgroups could reduce social pressure. Emergency dietary interventions like adding extra salt or other supplements should definitely be considered, but always in consultation with a nutritional expert.
And what does reaching Tier 3 really signify?
Ultimately, reaching Tier 3 indicates a fundamental system failure. It signals that major changes are needed, potentially involving housing design, overall management protocols, or maybe even reconsidering the genetics being used if the pigs are proving too susceptible in that environment. It requires a major overhaul.
So what does this all mean when we bring it together? It really seems like there's no single solution, no magic bullet for tail biting, does it?
That's the unequivocal conclusion from, well, pretty much all our sources. Tail biting is a classic example of a complex, synergistic interplay of factors. It involves the pig's environment, its nutrition, its health, its genetics, its social life, everything. Therefore, any truly successful strategy has to be multifaceted, integrated, and fundamentally proactive rather than reactive. The focus absolutely has to pivot away from just relying on reactive measures like tail docking towards a holistic system of prevention that addresses the underlying root causes of behavioral distress. It really means optimizing the external environment and simultaneously strengthening the internal resilience of the animal itself.
And what's the ultimate goal that some pioneering farms and even some countries are striving for? Rearing pigs with intact tails seems like the ideal. What are the key lessons from those who've actually succeeded in doing that?
Yeah, the ultimate goal is clearly to develop systems where pigs can be raised routinely with intact tails without facing an unacceptably high risk of injury. But, and this is critical, simply stopping docking without making comprehensive systemic changes alongside it is absolutely destined for failure. There was a telling retrospective study mentioned in our sources that actually showed worse outcomes, things like higher mortality and poorer feed conversion rates in farms that just stopped docking without improving other things first.
So you can't just remove the crutch without fixing the underlying problem.
Exactly. It's not about an omission, stopping docking, but about active addition and improvement across the board. Successful case studies from countries with long experience like Sweden and Finland, and from individual pioneering farms elsewhere show it is achievable. But they share common denominators.
Like what?
Things like superior housing, often with space allowances that significantly exceed the legal minimums, solid floor areas incorporated for comfortable resting, excellent ventilation and climate control systems, and almost universally, the non-negotiable continuous provision of high-quality, manipulable substrate like straw is seen as a cornerstone. They also tend to have optimized feeding systems designed to minimize competition, maybe like the long troughs common in Finland that allow synchronized eating. And importantly, a higher level of intensified management, meaning more diligent daily observation and a real commitment to swift intervention at the earliest signs.
So it takes significant commitment and system changes. Looking ahead now, beyond the immediate pen environment, what are the most exciting future research frontiers for preventing tail biting? Where's the science heading?
Two areas really stand out. First, genomics and selective breeding hold immense promise. We know there's a heritable component, which opens the door for genetic selection. Identifying that tail-biting resistant phenotype, finding the genetic markers for pigs that are just naturally less prone to the behavior, provides a clear target for breeders. Future breeding programs really need to strategically balance traditional production traits with measures of behavioral robustness and welfare.
And the second area, you mentioned the microbiome earlier.
Yes, the burgeoning field of microbiome modulation is incredibly exciting. If, as the evidence suggests, the gut microbiome really does play a role in mediating stress responses and behavior, then it might be possible to modulate it through targeted nutritional strategies. Think about using specific types of dietary fibers or prebiotics or probiotics designed to promote a gut environment that fosters a calmer temperament and enhances stress resilience in pigs. We're potentially talking about using diet as a powerful behavioral management tool in the future.
That's truly fascinating. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening to this deep dive? This seemingly simple, almost niche problem of one pig biting another pig's tail actually illuminates a much larger principle, doesn't it?
It really does. It shows how these complex behavioral issues, whether in animals or even potentially in humans, often arise from a whole stacking of unmet needs and environmental stressors, and that truly effective solutions require a holistic, often interdisciplinary approach that genuinely respects an organism's natural instincts and needs. This isn't just about pigs, is it?
No, definitely not.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really raises an important question for all of us. What other complex problems, whether they're social, environmental, maybe even personal, might we currently be treating only symptomatically, instead of really digging deep to address their mothership of multifactorial causes?
That's a powerful thought to end on. Think about that. How might understanding these complex dynamics in one specific field, like swine production, offers surprising insights into problem solving across many different areas of life or business? It's definitely a question worth mulling over long after our deep dive ends.